listening to the RMPodcast, the official podcast of Red Moon Productions. Here are your hosts, Brandon Davidson, Keith Cheatham, and Sean Sebastian. Enjoy.
Welcome to yet again another live episode right here on all your favorite social media accounts, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, Rumble. Not there yet. We'll be live there. That's right, live every single Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. The Red Moon Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Brandon Davidson, alongside our normal new host, Sean Sebastian, and Kevin Narwhal. He's a gnarly man because he's a narwhal. My phone ain't working.
Oh, no. Oh, my goodness. Well, we can't have a show.
It ain't working.
Did you?
I'm on LTE, that's why.
There we go.
I didn't go back to Wi-Fi.
Now we have light.
It was taking a while for me to switch.
See, without Brandon's phone, we don't have light.
I'm blaming this on my neighbor, Brian, because Brian sent us a video, and I couldn't play it because it was connecting to my Wi-Fi, and I was over there, so I turned the Wi-Fi off, and
it's all because Brian just wanted to share a humorous video with us.
And it was a good one.
Thanks for doing something nice, Brian. Gosh.
I'm not going to lie. I will say it was a funny video. It was a dog literally pooping on a tree.
Yeah.
And it was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
It's a sight to behold.
Yeah. I wondered if it was trained that way or if the dog just came up with it on its own.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
Here's a tree. We'll put my butt on it and leave my mark.
He did his business, and it was a job well done. Also, I want to give a special shout out to a friend that's been watching from time to time, and I told her I would give her a shout out on the show. Catherine Turner, thank you so much for tuning in. If you are right now, or even if you're watching on a rerun, I appreciate it. We appreciate the love here on the Red Moon Podcast.
Yes.
Anybody like, share, subscribe as always. Appreciate all the love and comments. Like, share, subscribe. I mean, the thing is, we actually had a comment last week, and I want to address this off the top because we're still looking into it. I swear, I don't know what is going on in YouTube land, and maybe I just haven't dug down the YouTube rabbit hole deep enough. But I have looked in all the different ways to make sure comments are allowed on our videos, whether it be on the live stream, whether it be on our reviews that are posted right after it's about 15 minutes into the show, like those go live because they're already uploaded. And it's like, I don't know what it is, but YouTube is the only platform where we have subscribers now continually getting new subscriptions every month, which is great. We love the growth. It's awesome. But they want to engage with us, and then they can't because they go to our video, they watch it, and they're like, why do you have comments turned off? I have looked on every video. I think it has something to do with the way it's rated for children, if you rate it for kids, kid friendly or not.
Yeah, we did have somebody last week that had some questions about that.
Yeah, and I'm like,
you can comment on our live show,
right?
No problem.
But then, and here's my problem.
It's going on though. Yeah.
But here's my problem with even the live streaming comment, and this is something with not YouTube but Restream, a service we use to simulcast it out to all the platforms, which we're hoping to put on Rumble eventually when I upgrade to that next tier. But I'm a little bit skeptical of upgrading to another tier, which is going to cost me a little bit more money. And the fact that when we have people who comment live and we have a seamless thread that Restream offers for us to respond directly, regardless of what service they comment from, it does not post after the live show ends. Yeah. They disappear. So then we get comment threads during our live shows that we'll respond to sometimes live, and sometimes we miss them and we want to go back and respond after the fact. And we can't follow up because they disappear. So I'm like, I need to reach out to Restream. I need to reach out to YouTube, try to get some guidance here. Because, all of our reviews I label as kid-friendly because they are. There's no bad content in them. And I don't know if maybe doing that, because they stipulate you have to select one or the other.
I think the only review that we have that's probably not kid-friendly is the one that Tyrese gives.
That's probably true, and
Yeah.
I actually think I did label that as not
That one.
friendly.
Yeah. Tyrese is explicit. Yeah.
I don't usually use language, but Tyrese does. So.
Yeah.
But-
Tyrese
and we,
does.
you know, he's on a
Foul
different
language,
plane.
I should say. We all use language, I hope.
Yeah, we just speak
Everyone
gibberish.
but the president. I couldn't help it.
No, it's too true.
That's it.
Nobody knows Bidenese, not even him.
It's like Bidenese and Pentecostal. That's the two that you got to have an interpreter.
It's like, is he possessed? We don't know.
He's not speaking in tongues. We don't know what he's speaking
He's
in.
speaking in dementia.
But no, that is very much that's
He's
the case.
three-dimensional.
But no, we have a great show planned for everybody. We've got
Yeah.
our next major review, another big one on the block, Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. Saw it just before our lake trip began and kicked off last week.
Mm-hmm.
So happy about that. It was a nice,
It was interesting.
relaxing weekend. Enjoyable. Back to the daily grind of work every week and every day, and I was not ready, guys. I just wanted one more week.
I don't
But
think
then-
anybody was
yeah.
ready.
I feel like that's always the case. Like, it's relaxing enough. Like, I literally almost always want to do a trip on a vacation and then come back and then have a week to unwind
Oh, that'd
and
be
just
sweet.
have no, like,
Yeah.
just nothing to do, nothing planned.
No, I agree with it because
You
people
know?
will be like, "Oh, you have been on vacation. You come back feeling relaxed and refreshed." It's like, no, not really.
No,
No.
you're just
tired.
And
Like I just
still-
got back last night. No, I'm not relaxed.
It's like I'm
And
tired.
I can't speak to this personally, but it's like, Sean, I know with kids, I'm like, if you take a vacation where you take kids along,
Yeah,
you don't have any time
it's
to
not
relax.
relaxing at all.
You're more worried about, did
Yeah,
they have
it's
fun?
very
Or
stressful.
Are they doing everything? Or we just want to survive
Yeah.
and
It's
get
fun.
home?
It's fun. It's just stressful.
Yeah.
I mean, being a parent
Yeah.
is stressful. That's
Right.
just
It comes with the territory.
That's
It's like
right.
the only vacations I've had where like I'm fully like feel rejuvenated afterwards are like stay vacations where you just stay home and don't do nothing.
Yes.
true, yeah.
It's like
And
a
well,
staycation is like, you know.
It honestly, I did it one year when I actually landed an extra week of vacation, and I did it at the it was in March or April, but somewhere in that time, and it was the perfect time because it was just when the weather wasn't still freaking frigid and cold. Go out and enjoy it, but it was also I could stay home. Not a lot was going on because the new year had just started, so people weren't planning stuff already. It wasn't in the hustle and bustle, and I think I'm gonna do it again next year. I think a staycation is a good like you set aside time to relax and just do that.
Yeah.
But no, we got a great show. Of course, our biggest headline of the night we're going to get into. We talked about it a little bit last week about us following up on it. Sure enough, as soon as we get out of the show, we go on vacation. SAG-AFTRA decides to strike.
It happened.
It's done. 1960s was the last time the WGA and the SAG struck. Now there's another one. We'll talk about that and dive into headlines.
Dive in.
But of course, we've got a great show planned, and we always kick it off with our movie review. So let's start out with the big one on the block this week. We got two big ones coming up too next.
Oh man, we got a lot coming.
Oppenheimer and Barbie, or Barbenheimer.
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 As the weekend's been named now.
Yep. That's big. We're gonna do Oppenheimer first, guys. Spoilers.
That's fine.
Oppenheimer's coming first, then Barbie.
Hey, Nolan said,
I didn't know we were doing Barbie.
Yeah,
I thought we said we weren't going to.
it depends. I think it depends on the content
Okay.
and how forced it is.
We'll see. Yeah.
We'll see what
We'll see what it's going to
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, some reviews that come out early. We'll give a sneak peek as to what's in it. Alrighty, guys. Yeah, let's move on to our review. Here is our review of Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1.
Say what you will about Tom Cruise, but the man certainly knows how to create a blockbuster. With the repeatedly delayed and long-awaited seventh entry in the Mission Impossible franchise, Dead Reckoning Part 1, Cruise and returning writer and director Christopher McQuarrie have delivered another hit, both at the box office and amongst critics and audiences. The first film in the series without any involvement from J.J. Abrams and his production company Bad Robot, McQuarrie and Cruise have proven themselves capable of picking up the reins and carrying on the series well before now. And Dead Reckoning stands amongst the best in the franchise. Filmed in two parts, Dead Reckoning sets itself apart from previous films and ups the stakes by pitting Cruise's Ethan Hunt not against other spies, governments, or secret organizations as in prior movies, but an advanced and sentient AI known only as the Entity. With every agency and criminal organization in the world eager to get its hands on such a powerful program, and the AI itself pulling strings for its own means, Hunt and the rest of his crew at the IMF must match wits against their smartest opponent yet. Such a premise easily could have become a goofy and over-the-top action piece, much like the Fast and the Furious franchise is now. But McQuarrie's attention to detail and well-written script provide a story that is believable, all while balancing the biggest returning cast in the franchise. New characters are given depth and motivation, while old ones never feel shoehorned in or unnecessary. Folding in 6 films worth of mythos, Dead Reckoning also feels the most like the one film in the series that brings together pieces from every prior movie. Cruise, as ever, knows how to do spectacle, with set pieces that not only entertain, but have real physics and weight to them. With most stunts and set pieces filmed practically, Dead Reckoning's action feels tangible, unlike the constant bombardment of poorly crafted CGI we've seen from other major blockbusters the last few years. Running nearly 3 hours, Dead Reckoning still packs in a smart story, character development, and action while never feeling rushed or too long-winded. By the time credits roll, I could hardly believe 3 hours had passed. Not to mention, there is still a whole second part to the story coming next year. It's a credit to just how finely crafted the film is that even just this first half of the tale is a blast from start to finish. While some moments might be a bit predictable 7 films in, and a very, very few clunkers in dialogue do exist, overall there's little to complain about with the latest outing. And knowing the time and care put into the series so far, I have no reason to doubt what Cruise and McQuarrie will deliver in Part 2. I give Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 3.5 out of 4 stars.
Wow.
Ooh.
Wow. And a half out of 4 stars.
1, 2, 3.5.
That's it.
3.5.
Tres.
This is our second week in a row we have a 3.5 out of 4 star movie.
I agree with this one.
Sound of Freedom was 3.5 by you as well, Keith. And also this one, and I agree. I agree with this one. It's a nice return to the series, to the franchise, and what we, I think, thought was kind of sunsetting Ethan Hunt's character in both Part 1 and Part 2. And of course, after the success of possibly, this movie as well as Part 2 and it picking up steam and promotion, I think, of course, Tom Cruise came out with that little blurb of, I'd love to keep playing until, I'm 80, until I'm Harrison Ford's age, who's doing Indiana Jones
81
5.
years old, yep.
And let me say this, for a return to a character, and granted, I know there's a 20-year difference between the two, Tom Cruise and Harrison Ford. Tom Cruise looks a lot better performing his own stunts in this movie than Harrison Ford in Indy 5.
That's true.
I think at 80 years old, Tom Cruise probably would still look better just because he does stay in shape. He does still do all his own stunts. I mean, and that's not a knock against Harrison Ford. I mean, people age differently, and Harrison Ford's never been into the same type of shtick as Tom Cruise. But yeah, I think Tom Cruise would probably still be more believable in the future if he does continue.
Right.
But for me, yeah, this is definitely, I don't want to say it is my favorite. I'd have to revisit a few. But I mean,
Fallout for me is still up there.
They all merge together for me right now. Like, I can't remember which specifics of which one's which after 3. And that's not because they're generic. That's just because there's so long happens in between each movie, and that's a good thing because I think that's why the movies are so good, is that they're not rushed like to release a year or two right after each other. That I kind of forget, not specific, like I know the stories and the plot lines, I remember all the characters, but yeah, this is definitely, I think, just well paced for a movie that's 3 hours long. We got almost 3. I think it's shy 10 minutes. It's like
2 hours 43 minutes,
something like that. But there was never a moment where I was bored. By the time the credits rolled, I didn't even realize we had sat in the theater that long.
No, it didn't feel like that at all.
They do bring back characters, like they bring back what's his name, Kindrich from the very first film, and I appreciate that we still have continuity. That it's not like, that's one of the things that bugs me to no end about the Fast and the Furious franchise. It's not just how goofy the plots become, but they can't even keep the same actors and what happened in, what happened in the first 2 movies of Fast and the Furious really has no relevancy to the plot as it is now.
Right.
Especially with this, was supposed to be the finale for Fast and the Furious, and they still, while they have homages to things in the past, they still don't really, none of the plot really correlates to where they started. And that bugs me because it's like, that's something you want when you're finishing a series off. Now, granted,
we don't know that this is the end. A lot of people assumed this was going to be the end, and now it seems like it's not. But whether it is or isn't, I appreciate the fact that there is a cohesiveness. If you start with Mission Impossible 1 all the way to Dead Reckoning, while you don't have to know each story because the central plot of each one doesn't really follow all the characters, and what they went through does.
Right.
And that's still referenced. Rebecca Ferguson's character in this movie, everything that she went through in the past, there's a reason why they have such a good moment with her character in this movie.
Yeah.
And the same thing with even having Ving Rhames, who's been around since the first one. Simon Pegg, who started in the third one. It's nice to see these people continue, but not just continue, to still have depth. Because while Ving Rhames is a very smaller part of this movie, he still feels integral. Simon Pegg they still have these emotional plot lines about how they became with the IMF, which ties into Haley Atwell's character. That while it's not a huge chunk, it still plays into the overall themes of this movie.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's just the attention to detail in these movies is why I love them so much. On top of the fact, like I mentioned in the review, the fact that the stunts are tangible and doesn't seem like these weird blobs of CGI that Marvel now has, where there doesn't seem like any real physics.
I was going to say, it goes to show you that not only practical effects and how well they stand out on film, but how much more reliable they are in terms of longevity for years down the road and standing the test of time, but also in terms of you not needing the huge planet crashing into another planet from a superhero movie to actually show something really cool in spectacle. I mean, that's why I am really excited about seeing Oppenheimer, knowing it's 100% practical effects,
right?
And there's no CGI in it. To me, that sells it more because it's like what I'm seeing is real. Same with this, when you're seeing a train fall off a cliff, and it's like, no, that was a real legitimate train that they used and flung it off the side of a cliff. Same with him jumping. I mean, everybody's seen the promo now at this point of him jumping off the cliff and that being real. It's like there's just so many things about why you still enjoy not only Tom Cruise and what he's been able to parse out and separate his personal life, because even for the years that he was getting bombarded with the Scientology stuff and even putting it out there, and he had, the ridiculous persona of going out there, he still has always kept it very personal behind the scenes and ultimately been very generous to those out in public. And he knows he's a movie star. He keeps his private life private, doesn't put it out there and put it on blast. He mostly just promotes the films he's a part of, and he simply comes out and thanks the fans for coming to the theater. And look at what happens. You have the best franchise opening for a Mission Impossible film, and of course this piggybacking off of his huge successful run last year with Top Gun Maverick returning to the big screen.
It's also, when have you not seen Tom Cruise give a performance?
Yeah.
I mean, and literally, we kind of joked about it at the lake with maybe one or two films that you would say were just not that good a film, but even him in those films, like he gives it his best no matter what he's doing, whether it's Born on the 4th of July or Top Gun or Mission Impossible,
Jerry Maguire
or freaking Jerry Maguire. I mean, he can do the serious too. So it's not just he's not just an action star. He does have a pretty good repertoire of being able to play different characters. I mean, he's a Swiss Army knife, and I like that about actors like that.
So I mean, I came down on 3.5 as well out of 4. Honestly, not much really in terms of nitpicking. In terms of maybe, I think you mentioned it in the review, and I would kind of piggyback off that and agree. It wasn't that there were clunky or bad dialogue. There were certain dialogue moments that didn't flow considerably well, and it wasn't because of poor writing. I just
Ethan.
That was the one part.
That was the only one that was like, ooh, that was a little campy.
Ethan is not necessarily a great name to scream.
Yes,
that just doesn't sound serious. But no, I honestly thought most of the dialogue was fine. I'm looking forward to rewatching it simply because I think there was a part of me that was on the edge of my seat in terms of not knowing what direction it was going to take. We're highly critical on this show about woke movies, and there's no shortage of them today. And of course, with major franchises, especially the ones Disney pushes, a lot of them turn woke, and they go woke sake for the sake of, or they sacrifice creative freedom and actually a good story and good content. So I was worried a little bit. I didn't have too much doubt, just because, again, seeing Top Gun Maverick, seeing how they even promoted this film, and how all the other Mission Impossibles have been.
Team, Tom Cruise
Right.
and McQuarrie. I think, they got a good thing going on. I was looking at, they've worked together multiple times. I know Jack Ryan was one. I'm trying to think of, or Jack Reacher.
Jack
Reacher,
yeah. I can't remember all of them, but literally every movie they've done together, I was like, oh, these have all been
Solid films.
Solid films, yeah.
And so I will say, I'm intrigued to see what part 2 is. I like the fact that this one is not like Across the Spider-Verse, where even though it was billed as a part 1 and then they kind of hid it and shuffled it under the rug for, promotional sake, but when you get to the end, it's a little jarring of like, this movie doesn't end conclusively.
Yeah.
I like that this one has a conclusive end of telling its
No
chapter,
cliffhanger.
and then it also leads you into, but there's still more to this story. And like you said, Keith, the timing goes by without there's not a moment in this film where I felt like they stayed too long on any one set piece. They stayed too long on any one plot element or narrative structure, telling. And so I'm like, I honestly, there's very minimal that I have to nitpick about this film. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, literally, if I could think of a nitpick, there was the scene with the yellow Fiat. I felt like there were moments of that car chase where they, especially when they get in that car for the first time and he's fumbling around trying to figure out how to work it and all that kind of stuff. I felt like that went on a little bit, just a hair too long. It's like, we get it, it's funny. And then there was a moment where the car is like, he's peeling out and doing donuts, and he just does like 6 donuts, and it's like, I think 2 of them would have got a point across.
True,
after.
but I did love that moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that you watch and you're just like, that just didn't sit well with me.
Yeah.
Of
Right.
course, it's awesome, but it that could have went a little bit quicker and maybe maybe gave some time for some other elements to that car chase. But the freaking car going down the stairs, I thought was insane. Because that's real. Like that was awesome.
I thought it was funny that I wish I would have seen this, or this had come out before Fast 10.
There's a very similar, almost exact.
And the fact that they both take place, they have chases in Rome.
Yeah.
But this one
so much better.
Does Fast 10
I saw a lot of
completely.
people comparing the train scene with Uncharted 2.
Yep.
And in a scene from that game, and I thought to myself, like, while Uncharted 2 is an amazing game, and playing through that scene is a different experience altogether.
Agreed.
Seeing it, though, whether it's whatever similarities there are, that was awesome.
No, I agree.
That's
just
actually what Sony could have taken a page out of Mission Impossible's book when they made their Uncharted movie, because that scene was more like Uncharted than the Uncharted
that
movie
was what was
was.
so disappointing.
true.
Is I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh, this is straight up from the game, and it's like
Yeah.
whether they played it or not, or even got the
Yeah,
idea
yeah.
from it. It's like they did a better job demonstrating it on film. Whereas, like you said, when you're playing the game, and you see it firsthand from that perspective, almost
different,
10,
But again,
more than 10
like,
years
what is
ago,
it? It's Uncharted 3 where they're jumping from
Out of the
box to box
plane.
out of the plane.
Yep.
And when that was executed in the film, the Uncharted movie, it was terrible.
It was.
And it's like, wow.
It wasn't as thrilling as when you're playing it in the game.
Right.
And granted, this is like, I think, the third Mission Impossible movie to have them fighting on top of a train. But even that scene reminded me of the beginning of the new Indiana Jones. And I thought this was better because there's a scene where they go into a tunnel just like in Indiana Jones. And you see, like, in Indiana Jones where they're kind of using that to fight. And the same thing happens with this. And it was much more believable because nobody's getting smacked off by something and coming back later like, oh, that wasn't nothing going...
Well, and it's kind of
hour.
funny because I really do think that this is going to be one of those movies that more people go and see. I mean, it's already proven by box office numbers. But it's interesting because I think down the road, most people are going to maybe remember Fast 10 or Indiana Jones coming out around the same time, but they won't know in what order. And if they ever watch those movies then, they're going to be like, oh, they ripped this off of Mission Impossible. And it's just kind of funny because they think back in the day of like, whether it was Dante's Peak and like Volcano releasing at the same time, or
Armageddon and Deep Impact.
Exactly.
Like,
these movies with similar themes. It's like a lot of these set pieces are very similar to either past films or even like the fact that they are set in the same city, like Rome. And yet it's funny.
Well done.
They are well done. But my point is it's like, it is kind of funny to see a string of movies come out at the same time with the same kind of set pieces. And you're just like, is somebody like talking to one another on these movies? Are they all planning the
It's
same
honestly
thing?
because Hollywood is just so unoriginal now. I think that they don't know. I mean, really, it's
That
just.
may be.
I mean, and that's like the only other. Barely even a nitpick because I don't really think it was much of a problem, but there were some certain action set pieces that I felt were predictable, but not in a way that I was disappointed. Like I wanted, like I'd be like, oh, he's about to do this, and it would happen, but I wanted it to happen because like it was done so well and it was really cool and it was the most logical thing to happen. That I'm glad that they didn't try to like pull a Ryan Johnson. It's like you think this is going to happen, but really he's just going to glide in from up here and make no sense and do it this way because it's like it's not subverting expectations when you do something so stupid that nobody could guess it because it's impossible.
Yeah, if anything, I think one of the biggest action scenes in the film, which is the with the parachute, I think having seen that 1,000 times on Twitter already, when you go to the movie and see it, I do feel like that was one of them things where it's like he's on the motorcycle, he's in the mountains, I know what's coming, and I already have seen it, so I know what it looks like. So it wasn't as much of a like a breathtaking moment that I wish it could have been by maybe if I would not have seen it blasted on everything on all social media.
Like
so
I understood the reason for promoting the film in that way.
Keep
and
some of your cards close to the chest,
Well, right,
man.
exactly. And honestly, that's kind of why I'm happy with even Oppenheimer, because so far the trailer, Nolan's very good about pinpointing like certain scenes that he wants to show that tell very generic, trailer stories to get you hyped.
Yeah.
But still holds so much back that it's still you when you go to see the film, there's something that surprises you.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that they did that poorly with this. I mean, part of, I think, getting people to get butts in the seats, and sometimes it's done well, and sometimes it doesn't matter how much money you spend. People aren't going to show up.
Yeah.
I think take Indiana Jones 5, for instance.
Yeah.
But with this one, people saw that. They saw the practical effects. And I think the only negative is that it's not that it's bad or that they don't do it justice. It's just you're almost expecting to see something on the same scale in another aspect of the film or in another part of the film, so that you can just be like, oh, there was still something worthwhile to come see. And there is for the entirety of the film. There still is a movie worth watching. But I can agree. It's like if you've seen the trailers, you've seen teasers, if you've seen clips online, they've been promoting that part like crazy as to Tom Cruise is still crazy and he's at it and he's doing all of his own stunts and this is the next big one.
Yeah.
And that's part of how they sold the previous ones, whether he was in the Burj Khalifa and Rogue Nation, or whether it was he did
the second movie is the most terrible Mission Impossible movie, but he did the mountain climbing.
Yes.
That was all real.
Yeah.
And I'm like, gee, I mean, that's crazy.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, physically, the guy's top notch in that movie, but
And he's
that
dedicated.
movie. That was
I
the
mean,
John Woo one. That was terrible.
When you see,
Yeah.
it
That was the only bad one.
Yeah, it's the only bad one.
But that's the thing. When you see that dedication from him, that's what they're using to sell the movie of, no, we're not, this isn't just strings and blue screen, and I think that is part and parcel why you are so riveted when you watch it and you're like, oh, wow, this is actually happening. It's a movie and, it's set up, but it's like, it's still amazing for them to pull it off practically. No doubt. 3.5 out of 4 stars for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Looking forward to Part 2. The story we're about to go into, there's no chance of Part 2 getting delayed because it's done, right? Excuse me.
I think they filmed them simultaneously.
I'm
didn't
pretty
they?
sure they did because
I guess that one's the only safe movie in Hollywood.
Alrighty, guys, let's move into the big headlines for this week because we got a lot to cover. So
I would say they
let's,
would have had to
roll that open.
Yeah.
But
No,
continue.
I was just saying, in order for them to release it like a year right after, I wouldn't think they'd still be filming, but I could be wrong.
Well, and I
I'll
don't
probably
think they
Google
would have
that.
been so on the nose about announcing it being Part 1 unless Part 2 was
Well, the next
definite-
one's supposed to
yeah.
be released August of next year, so that's just like a year,
year,
and a month.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I'm sure they were done together.
I think so too. Let's talk about the big news on the block. SAG strikes. It begins. So we've now got the WGA and the SAG striking, or as Team America would put it, the Film Actors Guild striking. But no, it's so confusing because, as you could tell by the title of this episode, is Hollywood dead? Obviously, I'm being a little cynical, but also I'm being partly, I'm almost kind of insinuating that maybe the old Hollywood is dead, and we're going to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
But let's at least get down, I guess, the nitty-gritty of what the strike is about, why it came to be, because they technically had voted way back in June to authorize a strike.
Mm-hmm.
June 30th deadline came. They extended the deadline to July 12th. They got to July 12th, and that was last Wednesday. They did not come to an agreement, so SAG decided to strike. And, of course, this is in opposition to – hold on, let me pull up the actual name. I always screw up the name of the producers.
The Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers.
That's
Yep,
it.
that's it.
That's the one. So basically, they are the ones that are willing and dealing for all of the studios, for the streaming services and platforms, for the big execs, for all the big studios. So they are the ones that are presenting the deals and the contracts to these other unions, whether it be IATSE for the behind-the-scenes workers, SAG-AFTRA for the actors, the DGA, Directors Guild, the WGA, the Writers Guild. So all of these different unions in Hollywood that have basically co-opted to join together to produce movies with the major players that are footing the big bills for producing all these Hollywood big budget blockbusters, and now putting them out there. And it's like they're saying, all right, nope, we're not taking the deal. They do this every 3 years, and every 3 years it's almost in conjunction and in line with the WGA's contract ends. Shortly after that, about a month later, the SAG contract ends. In between there is the Directors Guild contract that ends. So basically, it's a domino effect of all of these. It's set up to where all of these contracts end simply so that you can almost pressure the players at the table, the executive table at the top, to your demands. So what are the demands that are being asked of from SAG-AFTRA? Do we have any of that info, guys? Do y'all know any of that?
I'd have to pull it up in the.
I know. I mean, I shared earlier the article that goes over what they've been offered already and rejected, which I think is just astounding. But
well, go ahead, because that actually it's from the Post Millennial.
Yeah,
and they talk about just before the strike was initiated, they did come to the offer or to offer up a suggested package.
Yeah,
and I will say what the suggestion does cover all of the main points at what the SAG-AFTRA was arguing for.
Mainly, it's money and AI, like the Writers Guild, correct? I mean.
Well, I was gonna say, let's Sean. Do you have that info?
It just says that the AMPTP, what was it again? Alliance of Major Motion Pictures, blah 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 blah. So they represent the film companies like Disney and Warner Brothers and Netflix and all that, and they offered over $1 billion in wage increases, pensions, health contributions, residual increases, and including up to 3-year term contracts of protecting their jobs against AI or from AI taking their jobs. So it was 3 years to basically include protections against AI stealing some of those roles and stealing some of the jobs. So that was one of the biggest things they were worried about, and part of the deal is, we're going to try to protect you from that. I don't know how. It doesn't go into detail
I don't know what the details
of what
were.
those protections include, but it does say that the AMPTP are claiming that the SAG-AFTRA that they're disingenuous because they're asking for these things, and we're giving you these things that you're asking for and then some, and you're still striking. So it's kind of like, well, what is it that you really want?
I do know streaming plays a part. Actors want to see some type of revenue from things that go to streaming. I'll use an article I read today was from Mandy Moore, who said that for This Is Us, I think she was in
for NBC.
She said that she received a penny of residuals from streaming off of her work on that, and I do know. And it really does depend on how the contracts are made and how they're paid, because sometimes you get paid, actors can be paid a flat fee, and if that's the case and your stuff's sold to a streaming service, you are already paid for your work. I'm sorry. Now, if there is a percentage, which is what they're fighting for now, I think, is to get some type of percentage of residuals off of streaming services. But again, that would have to be put into the contract, which is what they're fighting for.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting, too, that I think it comes at a time where they're pigeonholing themselves because I think they feel like they've got the wind behind at their backs, pushing them forward, especially with the WGA striking.
Yeah.
Where I feel like the Writers Guild actually has a little bit more teeth in terms of being kind of treated like the misfits at the table, even though they're the ones who provide the material that really the rest of the production is based on, even the roles that are in the movie, and creates the characters that these actors play as. But it's funny that they are picking a time where, yes, they may have, and this kind of goes into play with what I wanted to bring up about, is this the end of Old Hollywood? But it's interesting that they're picking a time when Hollywood is not at its strength.
No.
Ever since COVID, they've been in a steady incline from the dwindling numbers of that year, but they're nowhere near the blockbuster season that they were pre-COVID.
No.
And even then, some of the movies that were put on the back burner that have now seen the light of day since we've come out of the pandemic. I thought this was interesting because Bob Iger gave a full-blown interview, and he kind of stepped in it. And Fran Drescher, who's the head of SAG-AFTRA, had her words to say directed at Bob Iger and calling him, of course, he's making billions of dollars every year. And yet he's the one that's one of these bigger,
He's one of the top 5 paid in Hollywood, isn't he?
Yes.
Or as far as producers or CEOs, or
top
production
executives.
companies. Yes,
one of the top executives, which he leads Disney.
Well, I mean, it makes sense.
Right. But, it does, and we're going to read another article here, but I'm getting off topic. So what's interesting, though, is you're having a year where Hollywood is not doing particularly well. A lot of these major big budget films are flopping. And they're not making up what they were projected to make, and they're from major studios. So yet, in the one instance, you can argue for better residual pay when it goes to a streaming service. That's fine. AI restrictions. That's fine. But when it comes to even your below-the-line actors or the ones who are not the A-listers who are making their money, and of course, they're the ones that have the loudest drum to beat because they have the big platforms, and there's reasons why they make the big bucks because they've got that claim to fame. However, when they're out there fighting for the little guy, quote unquote, they're not the first ones to give up their paychecks. And last I checked, when a movie tanks, you might have been paid for your role, or even if you went with percentages for the role in that movie and you may not receive a huge return because it did flop, you still are guaranteed a certain percentage of the funds coming back on that film after a certain amount. Whereas guess who takes the loss when a movie flops? Oh, the company does, the executives. And you may say, well, they're still making their big salaries even when they do make bad decisions. It's like, no, they also have their butt on the line when the shareholders come. Exactly. Bob Chapek didn't see it coming. And even Bob Iger, even though his contract has now been extended through 2026,
I know.
There's no guarantee that he's riding Disney's course into the future of a bright sunset. And it's like, or it may be a very bright sunset. It may flicker and burn out. But I think it's very interesting that they believe they have the leverage here, particularly at a time when Hollywood itself and the big blockbuster, big studio, budget busting, huge movie landscapes, they're not making their money.
Yeah.
They're not making back what they're putting into them.
First of all, I think it's hilarious that not that long ago, and I forget the guy's name, he was a former studio executive producer, that when we talked about it just a couple of weeks ago, they had said, well, what happens if the actors strike? He said, oh, nothing. It won't be a big deal for Hollywood because the writers are already striking. And now that it's actually happening, everyone's in panic mode because they realize, well, crap, the longer it goes on, this could have devastating effects for Hollywood. And like you said, I mean, you have both sides, because I agree with you. Yes, as an actor, like I stated, if you get paid a flat fee, you got paid no matter what, because that was your fee, unless you have a percentage of the gross like Robert Downey Jr. did with Marvel. You got paid for your fee, you go home. Now, if a movie completely flops and loses money, the actor's not the one that got hurt on that deal. It's everyone else involved with the production and the studio that did. So it is... The people that are getting hurt, in my opinion, would be your background actors and stand-ins, the people that nobody knows about, the writers that nobody knows about. And
they're definitely getting hit now because they're not working on
because
anything.
they have nothing. Yeah.
And they don't have the money to fall back on like the A-listers.
And it's easy for the A-listers to say, "Oh, well, we're doing this for the little guy," but they have the money and the power, the means to wait it out.
Yeah.
And granted, that's also to say they have earned that right too. You don't become an A-lister, and I mean, there's a reason that when you make it big, you do get paid more big bucks, whether you're a writer or an actor. So I'm not going to fault them for that either. You work to where you get to. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's the longer it goes on and there's nothing to, and I think this goes into, I think one of the other headlines a little bit. So until you're ready to move on, I want to get too into it. But as far as like Hollywood imploding on itself,
let's talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, if they have nothing to produce, nothing to send out, that's fine for now, where everything's already pretty much already in post production for the fall, so they can kind of we're safe for a little bit, about 6 months. But then what happens when you have no new shows coming out next year, no new movies coming out next year?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I want to bring up the Daily Wire article because I thought it's pretty good from a former top exec.
Yeah. But that's the one I was referencing. Yeah.
Right. But specifically, he says the writer's strike has been going on for months, but now the SAG-AFTRA joined, and the entertainment industry is effectively shut down until an agreement can be reached. Barry Diller, chairman and senior executive of IAC, or IAC, and Expedia Group, and former CEO of Paramount Pictures, says that the industry executives and top-earning A-list stars should take massive pay cuts in an effort to reach a long-term agreement. There's no trust, Diller said during an interview that aired Sunday on CBS's Face the Nation. You have the actors union saying, "How dare these 10 people who run these companies earn all this money and won't pay us?" While if you look at the other end of this, or the other side, the top 10 actors get paid more than the top 10 executives. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying either is right. Actually, everybody's probably overpaid at the top end. The one idea I had is to say that in a good faith effort, both the executives and the most paid actors should take a 25% cut to try to narrow the difference between those who get highly paid and those that don't. Diller said that also would be devastating effects if an agreement isn't reached by September 1st. Now that the actors have joined the strike, TV and movie productions are completely shut down. Now, there are a few outliers, truly independent productions. Sean, you'd sent an article about The Chosen. Got an exemption from any SAG-AFTRA members working in that production because the
AMPTP,
the gobbledygook, they do not produce any of the Chosen series. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's completely an independent production, so anyone working on it...
Well, plus it's all crowd-funded.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But SAG-AFTRA has said they're going to allow exemptions for productions that aren't under AMPTP. Like, if you're not a Hollywood production, if you're an independent production. And that's where, I think you shared that article as well about Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah.
That's where he was coming in and saying these actors...
They need to go to indie films.
He's saying all the actors need to abandon all these AMPTP produced productions and go to indie productions, because one, I mean, you are sticking it to the Hollywood execs and producers that way. Two, you're still working and getting paid, and three, you're giving these independent companies that are producing content.
I know. Did a major Hollywood actor, a huge leftist like Mark Ruffalo, actually submit an idea about meritocracy?
Wow,
existing in Hollywood.
And here's the thing:
what?
In his mind, I guarantee you, it's all about sticking it to the man. He's not even considering the other aspects that you're mentioning.
No.
But I do agree with him on the aspects you're mentioning, not so much about sticking it to the man.
He talks about creating competition.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, what is
you mean a free market enterprise? What the hell are we talking about? Sorry, I just... No, but
it's a perfect example. And this is where...
When it hurts them, then they start...
Yes.
Yeah,
when you realize that, maybe... having competition's a good thing because it gives you options.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's funny because this is the overarching point of is Hollywood dead? Is the Hollywood model, the studio model that has been existent for 100 years, since the early days when you had Paramount and Universal and all these major studios coming together to form? The bigger question is this a pivotal turning point for where, because we've seen that again.
I hope so.
This may not have happened since the 1960s, the WGA and the SAG, coming together to strike at the same time. But is this such a turning point where, because there is so much of a threat outside of just traditional Hollywood model, which was big studios supply movies to the theaters, theaters present the movie for the first time to the masses, masses come see it. Hey, now, because the reason this was a huge issue back in the 60s was because they wanted residuals for television and streaming purposes back then, which would have been VHS or home releases, or when that came down the road in the 80s. So it's like, I think it's interesting to see where we're at. I don't know if this obviously is not going to go away overnight, but are we at a point where even if the September 1st deadline is not reached, and now there's talks of, I do want to quote one thing he says at the end of this article, because I'm not sure exactly if I agree with him. This is going back to the Daily Wire article from Diller. He says, what will happen is, in fact, if it doesn't get settled until Christmas or so, then next year there's not going to be many programs for anybody to watch. So you're going to see subscriptions get pulled, which is going to reduce the revenue of all these movie companies, television companies, and the result of which is that there will be no programs. And as just that time the strike is settled, then you want to get back up. There won't be enough money. So this actually will have devastating effects if it is not settled soon. I get what he's saying there in the back end. If things aren't settled soon, there's going to be such a loss of money. But here's the thing. You're talking about an industry that is already bleeding money from producing terrible content as it is and not getting butts in seats. So if anything, I think when you're talking about subscriptions getting pulled, whether he's talking about in the sense that, these major production studios are now going to pull their content from like third-party streaming services, maybe go to their own, whether it's Paramount with Paramount Plus, whether it's Peacock that has NBC and Universal content. I mean, they may go under one roof. Netflix is definitely going to suffer with their original content, but ultimately, it's like I told you all before we started the show. I actually see this almost as an instance where people would pick a streaming service, stick with it, because there's so much content that even if you don't have original things, maybe platforms like Apple TV are going to suffer because that's all they have. They have no back catalog. But the ones that do have a back catalog, you're still going to have cord cutters who are like, I don't care if there's new content. There's still plenty that I haven't seen on these platforms.
For a while.
I may not subscribe to every one of them, but I may pick my one or two favorites and say, this has more of what I like, and if they're not putting out anything new, I'll stick with this one for a while.
And that'll help that one streaming service a little bit. But again, if they're losing subscribers en masse and you're only having people stick with one or the other, then overall Hollywood's still failing. And I think over time you're going to get bored, because there's streaming services now that, they have a back catalog, but I've kind of been through it and I don't care anymore about some of, like, I don't ever watch Peacock. I used my parents, but they have some back catalog on there, but there's not a lot Universal really has or NBC really has that I care about that I don't already own. Scrubs and Jurassic Park, and other than that, I'm like, I don't remember. I mean, I'd have to look at
what I wonder
content
would even happen, and we've kind of hinted on this in the past about the rights that let's say Paramount would have rights to a certain show or whatever, and they would lease that to Netflix or let them put it on their platform for a while. I think if you have something like Paramount Plus, where you have the big shows that Taylor Sheridan's putting out, like Yellowstone and all that stuff, if that stuff stops, people are going to quit subscribing to Paramount Plus because there ain't nothing else on there. And I think what they're going to end up having to do is, to get their money's worth out of any of their catalog, they're going to have to let Netflix show it again. And you're going to see Paramount releasing Yellowstone on Netflix for people to watch.
Or
if that's the
as
streaming
I mentioned,
service that wins
I just
out.
saw today CBS is going to air Yellowstone this fall on Sunday nights. First time on network television.
It gives CBS something to air, so if they don't have new, and that's the thing. But then you're still going to get this repeat of old content, and that's what they're going to show on air, like CBS, ABC. It's like, let's bring back old shows to show while we have to. And same thing with over time. I think people are going to get this would have to be an ongoing problem. Yeah, I don't think people are going to immediately pull their subscriptions. But if it takes over a year to get new content, people are going to get bored. And at that point, like he said, if people have stopped subscribing, stopped giving money, you don't have the money to make new content.
Right, but I think that's where it's a little bit nuclear in terms of, because look, if this truly is a dire effect and a ripple effect across the entire industry and changes the paradigm, I mean, if you lose the big studio model, which I'm not saying would be the worst thing in the world, the question still is, once something is destroyed, you still have to replace it with something.
Yeah.
And of course, that is kind of, to me, what I think is interesting, going back to Mark Ruffalo raising hell about having actual competition. Bravo, sir. You've learned what free market enterprise is. But it's interesting because I still don't think they have enough balls to break chains with, say, a union like the SAG-AFTRA and maybe go independent and create an independent studio. I mean, if you really wanted to, there's plenty of other options on the table, whether it's other independent production houses that are already in motion or a band of all different sorts of writers, directors, actors, members from IATSE forming their own, not union, but company.
Yeah, I think that's what'll happen.
This is what you need to do instead of being part of this one union that's only represented where we're going to get run over every 3 years or have to come up against these contract deadlines. How about we actually just form our own business and make our own production studio? These outdated forms of existing in the film world are archaic, they're old, and we need to create a new form of studio structure. Look, I mean, it's been no secret that for the last honestly, the last 2 decades, movies have been moving out of California because it's too expensive to produce.
Yeah.
You have a lot of studios popping up in Georgia, in Florida, over here on the East Coast, in other states they're filming on location because it's far cheaper. There's incentive structures now set up by state governments to offer up film incentives. And yet at the same time, it's like, while there's a healthy move to independent production, because now you have the opportunity to put it to a greater market with streaming services, you almost feel better and more empowered to directly negotiate with those streamers than to go through a big company like a Disney or a Paramount or a Universal.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's exactly, I'm not saying this will happen, I'm just saying if the current model implodes, if Hollywood crumbles as the big studio model, I think you'll see these smaller independent companies made up of former writers, producers, actors spring up to kind of take that place. They're still going to produce stuff. They may not be on as big a scale as Hollywood right off the bat, which is probably a better thing because right now the big blockbusters are mostly hot garbage. I think you'll see these smaller things come in to take its place. They'll start making deals with the streaming services like Netflix, because Netflix and all these other places, they don't have anything to offer if Hollywood's gone under.
Yeah.
But it's like, if these independent things like The Chosen, which has become very popular, it's on Amazon, it's on Peacock. I think there's another one that they're talking about getting onto streaming wise, and it's like, okay, yeah, and if people are actually watching that, and they are, because it continues to do well, it continues to get funded.
Well, people give money to it.
Yeah,
just like people were giving money for people to go see the Sound of Freedom.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, that's an amazing feat. Who gives money? Who donates money for you to go see
a movie,
a regular movie,
which is doing phenomenal at the box office right now. And it's one of those things where, I think you're not going to, this doesn't mean if Hollywood goes under as we know it, it's not the death of movie and television and in the entertainment industry. Yes. I think you're going to see something else rise from the ashes that is hopefully better, because at this point, Hollywood's just, they're not cutting it anymore. And their heads are stuck up their own butts so far up that they can't
I think that's twofold. I think that's twofold, because I think you have that problem existent within the studios, but also as well as within these unions.
Oh, yeah, no.
Whereas
it's not just the production companies.
And I don't mean necessarily like the DGA came to an agreement. The WGA, I think, is fighting for a little bit more because they just haven't ever been respected. And it almost takes a decade for them to finally be like, all right, guys, come on. Like, the reason why this whole strike happened for them on their side of things is because streaming has blown up. It's completely changed the game, and basically they're having to write so much content that there's just no rhyme or reason for the pittance that they're getting paid for. And basically they're now finally saying, okay, no, the time has come. Our dues are owed. Like, we're ready to receive our compensation. We've put up with this crap for long enough. And you could have SAG saying, well, we're in the same boat. And it's like, no, there's still an upper tier and a lower tier of actors here. And I'm sorry, but I think you still have the upper tier of actors, minus your Mark Ruffalo, who may throw out this idea. It's like, how many A-listers are really going to abandon the studio model that has not only given them the fame and the finances and the luxury that they have come to know and expect, but it's like, how many are going to abandon that model that has propped them up, that has given them the success that they've wanted and earned? Because I'm not saying they don't deserve to a certain degree. There's still a lot of hard work that has went into getting them on the platform they've been given.
I think Tom Cruise has earned the money he makes.
Absolutely. I would argue that there's a reason why Tony Stark and Robert Downey Jr. was making all that money for playing that role.
Yeah.
It's like, no doubt he was the reason why Marvel was as strong and as big as it was. He kicked it off. He had an end cap on it, and there was a huge arc for him as to why he was getting paid over and over.
Well, he drew in the viewers. It's like,
exactly,
people were going to Marvel movies specifically for that character and that actor, so it makes sense he gets paid because, I'm sorry, Zoe Saldana is not pulling in the same people Robert Downey Jr. is.
No, 100%.
Brie Larson's not pulling anybody in. So I'm just, and that's not. I mean, same thing. Like Tom Holland, he's a nice kid. He's Spider-Man. Spider-Man, the character pulls people in because people love it. That actor wasn't pulling people to those movies the way Robert Downey Jr. is.
Right. No, I would agree. And it's like, it's just going to take the upper echelon who have the louder voices to either, one, have to be met with extreme, basically the pyramid is going to have to crumble underneath them for them to be like, oh crap, the jig is up. We have no choice but to go this extra route.
Yeah.
Because I could even see literally some of the top biggest producers still banding together, some of the top biggest actors still having their union and still willing to independently work with other ventures and basically rewriting their contracts or how they interact with the independent market. But I still see that they can't change the way they have been engineered to think about this and how they've been represented over the years. Whereas I think you have a huge slew of newcomers to the industry, especially with how increasingly cheaper it is to make high quality productions. And then with the availability of streaming platforms and different ways to enter the market, there's just, I mean, we've talked about this countless times on the show. How irrelevant are film festivals becoming? Because now you can literally put something online. And it's like, why are they omitted just because of the way that it's consumed versus having to go through this archaic process of having hoity-toity, uppity, snooty producers in the highest upper echelon be like, no, it has to premiere at the Venice Film Festival or at Cannes.
It's the same thing with the Oscars.
Of maintaining,
right.
It's the same way of Hollywood and film creators maintaining this idea of prestige. But it's like you said, the golden age of Hollywood is over. That wearing your tuxedo to the premiere, that's over. Like, those things don't exist anymore. So yes, the old Hollywood is dying, if not already dead. So I think like the film festivals, the pretentious festivals like that you're talking about, I don't see any reason for those to exist anymore just simply because of that. There's so many different ways people can release their content, but it's just a way of them to hold on to this idea of them being hoity-toity or better than everyone else.
You know what the irony of that? You know what I was saying. You know what the irony of that is they did it to themselves.
Yes,
they were the ones who. I mean, you talk about the blow up of social media. You talk about all of these stars who have come out and they said, "Oh, but it gets me in touch with my fans and gets." But it's like, but now you're the product. So now you've turned into. No longer is it the movie that you're starring in. No longer is it the crew that is behind the film that's being produced that gets all the credit. It's now you are the centerpiece, and when nothing is there to represent you as promoting yourself, well then of course now it's no longer useful to you.
Nothing. It's just I'm sorry, I thought you were finished.
Well, I was just going to say they've destroyed that kind of prestige that came along with there was the celebrity status of back in the day when it was like, oh, they're unknown, they're untouchable, but I see them in all of these films.
There was a mystique there.
Right.
And
they've destroyed
I was going to say, like, I remember back when I was a kid, my mom would get autographs from movie stars, and she would put letters in the mail. She'd send 100 letters to Jack Nicholson before we got a print with his signature on it. And it's like, he might have signed it, he might not have, I don't know, but still, you think of like the untouchable nature of an actor back then. This is just in the 80s and early 90s. Now, when you see Jack Nicholson on the street in downtown Louisville, it's like, oh man, hey Jack, can I get a yeah? All right, thanks, man. Have a good night. Go to that bar down the street. It's real good. Like that's all it is. It's just another dude.
Yep.
Because they've marketed themselves online that way. Well, not Jack Nicholson. He don't even know what the internet is.
Well,
but
he's completely out of it. You've seen shots of him.
He might still be alive. I don't know. But no, like most of the ones that are on social media, yes. And I think with someone like Chris Pratt, it makes you relatable. It makes you. It makes people want to get to know you. Oh man, that I could have a beer with that dude. He's probably pretty cool. That's fine, but at the same time, if you want people to think of you as this, this star, you're a star that's fallen down to our level now,
right?
And you're no longer out of reach. I can reach out and touch you, and again,
that's created new realms of possibility for breakthroughs in I think those who can achieve and attain,
positive and negative,
right? It's created the industry to grow at a rapid pace over the last several decades, into which it has become more approachable by indie filmmakers and indie studios, but at the same time, there's a reason why Tom Cruise was the A-lister and can still draw an audience, because you don't have people with that name where it's tethered to, oh, he's just the movie star and I can go and enjoy the film because he's giving me a performance that's not only worth my time and money, but I don't have to worry about his BS politics or his BS religion or whatever it is I disagree with him.
He loves film.
Exactly. He loves to entertain.
Yeah.
He is there to entertain, and he makes sure that when he's doing an interview or when he's interacting with fans, he's there for them. He knows that that's part of the allure of being a movie star, and that was what made it such an out of touch experience when you came into touch with normal people.
Yeah, he's not like Adam Driver where he gets up and leaves in the middle of an interview because you showed a trailer or a picture, a clip from one of his movies.
Right.
Like how pretentious and weird is that?
Right.
Like that makes you completely not star status to me.
Right. And here's the weird thing:
weirdo.
how many are there in Hollywood that actually? They play that up. They say, oh yeah, I'm not that big into this
the
or that.
Humility thing.
There's just there is no
humility.
humility, or they think their humility is I'm just going to be the same person I always would be, and it's like there's a reason why you haven't elevated above just being a normal. Maybe you're a well-known actor, but there's a reason you had back in the day character actors that were well-known. They, you could pinpoint. I mean, there's tons in old Disney movies I remember that it's like, oh, I see him in all of them.
Yeah.
But there's reasons why they just had those roles, and they were okay with just being that role.
Yeah, Don Knotts.
Yeah.
I mean, he was okay with being the same guy and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just an example that comes to mind. I mean, he was the same dude in Mayberry as he was in Herbie, so the Love Bug. So it's just
But it's just interesting because I do think this is a pivotal turning point. Obviously, only months in the coming months will tell what's going to happen. Somehow, I just don't think we're going to get our wish.
No,
of
I don't
old
think
Hollywood completely
I don't
dying.
think it's going to implode on itself because the actors don't want that either. Because again, like you said, a lot of these A-list actors, it's one thing for Mark Ruffalo to say, well, let's go boost up these independent companies. But many of them, they want their bread and butter. They want to hold on to that elitism and act like they're superior to everybody else. And they can't do that if Hollywood implodes.
And that's what I think is so... When you get to the crux of what Mark Ruffalo is bringing up, it's like, yeah, I agree with you. The problem is not only do you have to have that backing from all of your cohorts, but also what I think is hilarious is I'm like, tell me the one time that you try to go and do this and it fails, or a independent studio that you created doesn't work out, and you learn real quick, oh, this is what this is the problem with the big execs like not getting paid, is they're the ones putting all the risk on the table, and they're the ones whose bottom lines don't end up, or if they come up short, they don't get the bonus or they don't get paid millions of dollars.
Yeah, even in this article, the guy says, he's a former CEO of Paramount Pictures, and I'd like to know, well, when you were the CEO of Paramount Pictures, would you give 25% of your salary?
True.
Yeah. It's easy to say now, but when you were in that position, and I think that's a lot of this stuff. Same thing with Mark Ruffalo. I don't see him stepping out to do any of these things, these ideas that he's giving. He's not doing anything to bring them to fruition. So it's just there's a lot of kind of put your money where your mouth is.
Right.
Yeah, I think he wants to act like he's an auteur. Like, oh, I want to make movies that matter, not just be the Hulk. But then when it comes down to it, and he's no longer making money, is he going to still say that?
Yeah.
Because it's easy for like someone like Nolan, I could be like, yes, he's someone who actually cares about the technique and crafting film. When he talks about stuff like that, I believe him because we know he puts his money where his mouth is. He left Warner Brothers over issues.
Okay, but here's the same thing.
Universal.
But I would hold him to the same standard that I would hold Leo. It's like I know Leo's an exceptional actor, but I don't expect Leo to just go back to doing indie films and take a cheap pay. Because here's the thing.
I'm not saying that at all.
No, I know. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm just saying that Nolan has earned the luxury of being able to be one of the A-list directors, to have the freedom to create the movies he wants, but at the same time, he still has to create an appealing film that attracts people.
Yeah.
If Tenet would have been the first movie he released well before The Dark Knight, I don't think we'd be seeing much of Nolan right now. I mean, there's a reason why he went the course he did, and he was able to baby step his way into becoming the director that can take all the risks he wants because he's earned that. But those who haven't, same with actors, who haven't earned that respect or that experience to come in and say, I'm going to pick and choose the projects I want, or, this is the cap that I set as to, there's a reason why every year when they come out with the list of the top 20, highest paid actors and actresses, you see big names on there like The Rock one year or Tom Cruise like last year.
Next year, The Rock is said to be I haven't seen what movie it is, but he's accepted a role that's going to put him at the top paid actor in the world.
It wouldn't surprise me.
It's probably the second part to Fast and the Furious.
It would not surprise me.
Yeah, I'm joking.
And Vin Diesel's like, for family. You back in.
Give me some of that money for family.
He's in the after credits scene, so we know he's coming.
Oh, he's coming back.
We already know he's coming.
I don't think we're going to get our wish. They're going to come to some kind of agreement, and of course, all the hub. I do think it's hilarious that because of the star power, quote unquote, or the notoriety of a lot of these A-list actors, the moment the WGA struck, it made headlines and people were talking about it. But the moment this happened, it was like I've seen interviews done with actors calling into news shows and doing interviews on cable news networks, and I just think it's funny that I'm like, oh, so now you'll get out there when your union strikes, and because you have the allure and the prestige of being on screen and that camera appeal, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, of course you'll get out there and promote your efforts, and you'll definitely beat that drum that you've been wanting to beat. But it's just funny how it's like now we're paying attention.
I think it's also interesting. One of the things that the SAG-AFTRA are after is they want an 11% wage increase, and their reason for that is what? It's due to inflation. That's what they literally quote that and say
that's
that.
true.
The 11% pay increase is because of inflation. What inflation? I thought it didn't exist.
Well, I was going to say, and I'd love to see who everybody in the SAG voted for in the last presidential election.
You voted for that
and
inflation.
You can thank that inflation on the current president.
Not just, nationwide, just look at the state of California in general.
Exactly.
And all the laws that it's like, you're the reason why you have to pay so much to live in California.
Again, and that goes back to the other point we were just talking about with Mark Ruffalo. It's like, okay, that's fine. It's one thing to talk the talk, now walk the walk. And they're too afraid to, because they're going to come back to the table. They're talking all this talk, and then once all the strong words are said back and forth. Because look, let's be honest. Bob Iger mentioned the same thing about how what they're asking for is unruly. It's unacceptable based on the current climate that we're in. And look, I know he's blowing a lot of smoke too, because he's coming from the other side of the table. He's trying to protect his investment in his company. And yes, Disney is much more than just movies on the big screen. It is theme parks. It is resorts. I think did you say it at the beginning of the show or prior to recording? There were even some things that Disney's still wanting to get rid of.
Bob Iger, I said it before the show. Yeah, I was just reading an article the other day where Bob Iger has stated that he hasn't said they're going to yet, but he said they are considering pulling even more content from Disney Plus as a cost-saving measure, which I can only imagine is for tax breaks, because I don't understand. Because he said not just... It makes sense when it's third-party stuff, because he said they would pull things like not directly produced by Disney, but he said even things that are fully owned and produced by Disney, they're considering pulling if they're not being watched.
So they can count it as a loss.
And I'm just like, that's so insane. It's like, if you fully own it and produced it, it's like, why am I subscribing to your service if at any moment you could just pull anything from that service
That's right.
that I may want to watch.
What faith do I have in anything you produce from here on out?
It's fine to say it's like, well, all the big releases will still be on there. That's fine. The big releases are Marvel and Star Wars, and I don't give a crap about them right now. So you're saying you're going to keep your garbage
and those
content?
are the very series. Those are the very series that he's actually talking down because he's saying there's content overload.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we already know we're not getting that because, thankfully we're finally burnt out on it, and you're finally saying, we're going to put a little pause on those.
5 series a year for both franchises is a little much. You think?
I think it's a hard line to walk though, because if Disney if they pull Star Wars content and they pull Marvel content, then it shows that they don't have a lot of faith in Star Wars or Marvel, which then in turn makes the viewers not have faith in whatever the next movie is going to be in theaters, and it's like people are not going to show up to see it. It's like, if you're not going to give the time and effort to what's on your streaming service, you show me that you don't really care about this IP and you're not taking care of it. Like, I don't want to see it.
The same thing goes for Netflix with the stuff they've pulled, or the stuff that they haven't had the faith in terms of, we launched this season, we promoted it like crazy, we talked it up.
Yeah.
You had a few people who were diehard investment fans bringing up the Dark Crystal.
Yeah.
And the fact is then it turns out that, it's not profitable, so we're going to go ahead and cancel it.
I wouldn't be surprised if they end up doing that with The Witcher. Because I think they're going to tank because of season 4 and Cavill being gone.
Yep.
And this would be a great excuse for them to say, "Hey, because of the strike, we're not filming season 4.
Yep.
So we're just going to go ahead and scrap the idea with Hemsworth and stop."
And it's interesting because one thing that was kind of, I think it was off the cuff of it was a CBS interview I was watching, and I forget who the actor was, talking about the strike, and it was interesting because they were even mentioning about how they were like, these streaming services are very particular about what numbers they release.
Yeah.
And I was like, I would love to see negotiated in this contract that they need to have hard earned, like, here's the percentage of 25% watched, 50% watched, 75% watched, 100% watched, all the way through every episode of every series of every movie. And in that way, you as an actor or you as even a producer can know thoroughly the analytics of what it is you are owed based on, are people actually tuning in?
Yeah.
Because we know for several years now, since several, I forget how many, earnings calls they've had where they finally just stopped reporting on subscription numbers. Yeah. They started, we just saw this recently with Disney or with Netflix.
What.
Right.
They cancel stuff left and right and say, well, nobody's watching it.
See, that's where, as the viewer, I would like to see the percentages, because I would like to see, okay, if the Dark Crystal had, if 75% of people watched that all the way through, then why the hell did you cancel it? And as a patron, as someone who's paying for the service, I want to know that.
Well, and again, it doesn't give you any faith in their IP that you've already invested in. And who's to say that there aren't series? We know this from the past. There are series that exist that don't actually hit right off the bat, and then years later
they become huge.
People glom onto them, and then all of a sudden it's like it catches like wildfire on social media. People drum it up.
Yeah, Firefly,
exactly.
Arrested Development. That's why Netflix. That's why
Yeah.
Netflix revived it. And granted, they didn't do anything good with it, so it got canceled again.
Yeah.
But and that's the thing. Netflix spends all this money on these shows that then they end up just scrapping, and you don't know the money. I know I sent you an article the other day about the live action One Piece, just because I'm a fan of the anime, and it's one of the most expensive shows.
$18
they
million an episode.
$18 million an episode. I think the only other shows that Netflix has that they've
Anime.
Yeah.
No.
Live action.
It's live action.
Netflix is
Okay.
making a live action version of this anime.
I was going to be like $18 million an episode for a cartoon.
It is the most popular and most successful anime worldwide, and Netflix bought the live action.
I don't know anime, so that's.
But they bought
cool,
the rights for the live action, and they're spending
Okay.
$18 million an episode. I think the only two shows they have more than that are The Witcher and Stranger Things.
Yeah, Stranger Things is up there.
I was looking. One of the only other shows that spent more than them is also Rings of Power, because they spent $100 million an episode for that.
Oh my
thing.
God!
Yeah.
Whoa!
Yeah,
$100
it was
million.
$100 million an episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why did I miss that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
It was over.
that link I
Yeah,
sent
the
you-
first season was $1 billion.
Stranger Things is similar, not quite that much, but yeah,
I
Stranger
thought
Things.
so much of that was due to the rights of Rings of Poo.
No, they bought the rights,
but then they
it
dumped
was
a bunch of money
$1 billion
into
for the first season.
And
Oh my God!
Yeah.
But here's my thing. You're spending all this money.
Yeah.
Bezos sucks.
Yeah.
But here's the
He
thing, you're
deserves to
spending
lose that
all
billion.
this money. Netflix is spending all this money on something. They released the trailer for One Piece and it looks god awful. It looks terrible. And I'm like, you spent $18 million per episode. The CGI looks worse than Marvel's current CGI. And that's the thing. I don't
That's saying
understand
something.
that these companies, they won't show you who watches what, but they'll cancel things left and right while still spending all this money that I don't understand why. This is why Netflix constantly says they work in the red, because you're spending money on things that you don't need to spend the money on.
Well, and again, it goes to show you what it's like. These streaming services are
It's
new to the
58 million
game.
per episode. Yeah, 100 million's a lot.
I was
That
going to
makes
say
more
it was
sense.
58?
58 million per episode.
I
yeah.
thought they-
Still,
I
I had to put
that's
it
still
up.
mind-boggling.
I thought I had read that the season
Stranger
was $1
Things
billion.
was 30.
Well, it
it's
might have
30
been if they
million.
included
Well,
the rights
and marketing and all that. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Lord of the Rings is 58. Stranger Things is 30. House of the Dragon's only 20 million per episode.
God.
And look at how much better
Yes.
it looks.
Yep. Yeah.
Than
Well, and here's the thing.
Well, how much was Game of Thrones? Because I know those episodes were ridiculous too.
for their time?
At the time,
Yeah.
it was 15 million per episode, and
Okay.
they were the most at the time.
Yeah, at the time they were the most
But
expensive.
it goes to show you, though, and HBO has been in the game for a long time, and they have produced high-quality series that are very focused on what their intent is and what they want to do and what they want to accomplish. You have these streaming services that are coming into the game. They just want that major IP to slap a label on it and say, look what we got, and to attract eyeballs. And I'm sorry to say, yeah, it got me to watch Rings of Pooh the first season, but every episode was like, are you serious? This
Yeah.
is garbage.
It
It's
is.
terrible. It gave me a reason to hate it and to tell other people, hey, if you're even on the fence, do not watch it.
Yeah.
It is god awful. It's terrible.
It sucks though.
But
Now it's like a train wreck, and like I don't want to support them and them like get.
Oh, I know.
views,
I
but
wanna
also,
yeah.
but I want to see how bad it gets.
It's where I'll use the excuse that we normally give with watching bad movies of like, well, we got to review it, we got to talk about it. But no, I agree. It's like, it's crazy to me that you're seeing now what I thought we were kind of beyond, because the movie industry was so mature, having existed for 100 years. Kind of what you saw way back in the early 2000s when movies would release and they'd have a video game companion, and you knew as a gamer it was always just a cheap tactic to throw on an extra way for the studios to make money. They just put out an IP game that went along with the movie. It was the most there's nothing interesting about it. You could beat it in like 5-6 hours.
Yeah.
It followed the same
Disney
plot as
was
the
notorious.
story. Oh,
Aladdin, The Lion King, like all those
now,
games
those
that came
old
out.
2D
Some of those
ones
were actually fun,
pretty
though.
good.
I had
Yeah.
Aladdin on Super
Aladdin
Nintendo.
was good.
It was great.
But like when you're talking Toy Story for PlayStation,
yeah.
or I think of Transformers games on PlayStation 2, like there were just several games that came out that were movie tie-ins that were god awful, very rare exceptions, and yet at the same time it was a given that was going to happen just to promote the movie and vice versa. And yet I feel like I thought we were beyond that in the movie industry.
Yeah.
And now you get streamers coming into the game, and you have Netflix and you have Amazon and you have these major players. Think of Google and when they introduced Stadia and they were going to change gaming and cloud gaming forever. It's flopped bigger than ever.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you still have to have quality content. Just because you throw a lot of money at major IPs, you may pique interest for a while, but people know when something is quality and when it's just shit. And I'm sorry, when you keep producing garbage, it's going to catch up with you. That's the problem Disney Plus is having. And it is. It's catching up with the industry as a whole, and it's why you're running into the issues you are now that are causing the strikes. And at the end of the day, when you have a product that is subpar, but it's widely available on so many different platforms and levels, you're going to reach an implosion point. And I think we are there to a degree. I don't know what's to come of this. We're going to continue to follow it over several months, of course, but I really do think this is going to change the industry for a positive, in the sense of we know these underlying problems exist. They don't go away overnight. They don't go away after one contract negotiation. They're going to come back up and creep back up because the market, believe it or not, it does course correct. When money is not being made, when people aren't putting butts in seats, hate to say it, the bottom line of the dollar amount does matter. And these big companies are learning that real quick, real soon. More than just the strikes, but also with the box office amounts. So with that being said, of course, yes, we're going to continue to follow it. We're going to keep looking at it week to week as it continues to go on, and we'll update everybody with the news and continue to share our opinions on the Red Moon podcast.
I just want to watch Hollywood crumble and burn.
I know, and it'll give Red Moon Productions yes. It was so needed there. All right, let's move on to another huge controversial topic, but in the gaming industry.
Yeah, we were just talking about games.
Yeah, we were.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it in multimedia.
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 Multimedia. Let's talk about our multimedia segment. What is it? We are talking about Activision and Blizzard are able to be acquired by Microsoft.
Almost. They have one slight hurdle, but everybody believes they're going to go over. The CMA and the United Kingdom, they still have to. But they're already negotiating. Like, they've already postponed the trial and are negotiating. They believe that'll be worked out. Yeah. So.
I mean, I think it's interesting because obviously the big hubbub was Sony trying to throw shade at Microsoft and say, oh, if they acquire them, it's game over, and they're going to have so many exclusive rights.
They were trying everything possible to stop this acquisition.
And I think it's funny because I'm like, for one, yeah, it's kind of the pot calling the kettle black, and also the fact that Sony, I get it in legal terms why Sony's going to throw everything they can at it.
Yeah.
Because why wouldn't you? I mean, you pay these litigators, or these lawyers anyway. It's like, why not litigate something like this and see if you can come out with a win on top? But at the end of the day, I kind of said this before, again, before the show. I was talking to you guys. I think what this is really just surmising is Microsoft has deeper pockets, obviously, because they're not just affiliated with games.
They get their bread and butter elsewhere.
Obviously. And even back in the day when they launched into the console, race, it's like even then they were a no-name coming in with the deep pockets of Microsoft and Bill Gates pursuing gaming at the time, and they did create a platform with exclusives that sold consoles. And at the time, there were very little in terms of, I think, first-party studios for even Sony that would sell consoles other than just the notoriety of PlayStation 2 being the most successful console of all time. And at that time, when it launched in that generation, being the biggest platform for why developers came to it. But then when Xbox entered the ring with, or Microsoft entered the ring with Xbox, and then Nintendo has still come up behind the ranks with their claim to fame games and their IP that is popular and only offered on their console, you're basically seeing, I think, Microsoft buying the exclusivity that they've not been able to come up with their own first-party studios.
They couldn't make good first-party games themselves, so they're just going to buy other studios to do it, which is part of Sony's argument. They're like, well, how's that fair? It's like, well, why isn't it fair? Like,
Sony did the same thing. They bought Naughty Dog. They bought
every company that's made major
Naughty
hits
Dog's
for you.
A little smaller than
they all are.
No.
Sony has bought smaller
everything
companies.
in Sony's library is considerably smaller than Activision Blizzard.
Right. It doesn't make them any less valuable in terms of experience and game, but
all
value.
Sony should care about, and all they do really care about, is that as long as they have games that are selling their consoles, and they know they're going to sell millions of units of that software, that's going to give them deep, the profit. That's what they care about. It's like just to yell at Microsoft and be like, but they've got better money making machines.
They got Call of Duty,
and they've got freaking Diablo or.
That's the thing.
Elder Scrolls.
That's their argument is, Doom. Which
that's Bethesda, but that's...
Bethesda is Doom, Elder Scrolls, and
Diablo.
Starfield now, right?
Yeah.
And then Activision Blizzard has Diablo, Call of Duty. There's a few of them, but that was actually
and also aren't they? They're going to have all of like is Magic the Gathering separate? Isn't that under its own? I can't remember.
I don't think that's part of
okay, I didn't know if they were part of. I thought they were part of Blizzard for some reason.
That's World of Warcraft is part of Blizzard.
Oh well, then there you go. They've got WoW. Yeah. I mean, come on,
which is a huge one especially for Microsoft, who is PC. That's a big one for them. But it was funny. It's funny to me because I know
it's $69 billion.
Yes, it's massive.
It's a huge acquisition.
To me, all of just seeing how much shady stuff both companies do within the release of all these court documents was hilarious to me. And even the fact that, because the judge even brought up, or maybe it was Microsoft's lawyers, I don't know who, mentioned Nintendo because Sony's only fighting against Microsoft, and Sony had said they don't consider Nintendo a competitor; they're their own thing. And which to a degree they have a point. Like Nintendo fans
What
are
if
kind of their own
Microsoft
breed.
turns around and says the same thing?
But that's the thing. It's like, okay, Nintendo has their, because that's what the judge had asked. It's like they have games you can only get. You can't play Mario anywhere else. You can't play Donkey Kong anywhere else. You can't play Kirby, Metroid. And Sony's like, yeah, but that's its own ecosystem, and that's what Microsoft is saying they're trying to create is their own ecosystem. So,
and it's no secret that for quite a while now, I mean, Xbox with its creation of Game Pass years ago, they just changed. Xbox Live Gold is now going to be Xbox Game Core. It's a weird, I think it's a bad rebranding.
Yeah.
But the thing is they've almost pivoted to where Xbox is not a console anymore, it's a service.
Yes.
And they've made Xbox kind of just like DirectX on their PC platform to run games, or that engine to run games on the PC platform. It's almost like they're doing the same thing now with Xbox of saying, well, this is going to be the gaming platform for Microsoft going forward. And they're trying to kind of put it all under that banner. And so it's not really to sell boxes that sit under your TV anymore as much as it is going to be to sell software through their storefront and through their many different avenues of trying to get you to play it on whatever device you want to play it on. And I get the worry of it becoming monopolized. But to me, the gaming, we're at such a thriving point with gaming in terms of so much creativity, whether it's in the indie space or even the AAA space. Like, I still would argue that there's a lot of AAA games that, while they borrow similar elements from others, are still so diverse in many different aspects. I mean, there's a lot of AAA games that have just come out this year alone that I've gotten a myriad of experiences with, whether that's Zelda Tears of the Kingdom on Nintendo Switch, or RE4 Remake, which is on the multi-platform, or even FF16, which right now is a PlayStation 5 exclusive. Like, there's tons of AAA titles in and of themselves that come out that are still so diversified in the way that you play and the way the story is told, that it's like there's just no, just because you make a crap ton of money off selling one. I mean, it'd be the same thing as arguing with, like, I know that I forget the studio that does Fortnite. Epic. Is it Epic that owns Fortnite? But they basically have been in this battle, this court battle with Apple iPhone
for a while.
And basically saying, look, it's not fair.
Yes, it is Epic.
It is okay.
Yeah.
That it's not fair. They charge us for when people sign up on our app, on our game app, that they want 30% of the cut.
Yeah.
And it's like, technically, it's like you don't have to be on Apple's platform.
Yeah.
And then they would argue, no, that's ridiculous. They're one of the largest platforms out there. It's like, well, then this is the price you got to pay to entry. And it's like, in some ways, I do understand where Epic's coming from, but in another, it's like, this is the platform that Apple built. They're the ones who built this platform and invested the money into it. You can agree that it's not the greatest, but you can also do like what Twitter or what I've seen other services do, where they're like, Amazon does it. You can cancel your Amazon Prime subscription in the app, but when you go to the Amazon Prime section in the app itself and you're not subscribed, they say you can't sign up here, but you can go to a web browser. Yeah, it sucks. It's a workaround, but that's the way to do it. And the point is like, when it comes to the Microsoft buyout of Activision Blizzard, it is insanely large, but I don't think it's going to limit the creativity of other studios, especially ones that are already acquired by Sony, from creating games that are going to put them in a run for their money. Now, when it comes to COD, and it's funny because right after this deal came through, a deal that was on the table before that Sony didn't sign, they now have renegotiated and signed a 10-year contract with Microsoft to put COD on PlayStation platforms, which I think is just funny.
Well, that was the biggest argument they had, was that if Microsoft gets Call of Duty, they'll make it exclusive.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of the word. Sorry.
And Call of Duty has the biggest. They have the biggest fan base. It's the largest
it is
fan
online.
base game. Online. So I mean, I would want that on my platform too, just because of how many millions of people play it.
Absolutely.
But
But
here's
I think
the
that's why Xbox also knows it's one thing to make Bethesda games exclusive. I mean, they're huge, they are massive, and that's part of the argument they were having versus Sony, because Sony was using Bethesda as an example.
Yeah.
Xbox said that a lot of these Bethesda games would be multi-platform, but within when they purchased it, they changed their mind and have made Starfield and some of these others that were going to be developed for PlayStation exclusive. And Sony's saying, well, they're going to do that with Call of Duty. They'll say they won't, but once they get it, they'll do it. And Xbox's argument is that it's different in that, yes, while those games do have they are huge and have massive fans on both consoles, it's not the same as an online game like Call of Duty where the bread and butter is all these people
multi-platform.
Yeah, multi-platform.
I was going to say, there's
Crossplay.
no way.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense for them to pigeonhole it on one console, especially one that they know by their own metrics of saying, if we put this on Xbox only, it may sell a few consoles, but there's going to be plenty of people who are like, all right, I'm not going to buy it.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but that's enough for them to be like, that's going to hurt our bottom line. Like, we just paid a crap ton of money for this franchise. We want it to be successful in any way, shape, or form. I mean, to me, that's where it really comes down to. It's like, there is a reason to have certain things exclusive, but it's funny that even Sony has branched out of this box in the last several years. We're offering MLB The Show because there's no other great baseball like sim game that you can get on a platform, and they thought, all right, if nobody else is going to compete with us, we'll offer this on another platform like Xbox, our competitor, and we'll reap the benefits of it.
Yeah.
And Xbox is like, sure, we'd love to have it. Because at the end of the day, it's like, well, if it's going to sell on our console and you're happily going to put it over there, it'll make our customers happy who buy Xbox already, and you're going to profit off of it. It's a win-win. I'm like, I don't see this being any different.
No, and it's not like MLB The Show is a console seller either. So that's not one of those exclusive games that people are going to buy a PS5 just to play that game.
No, you're right.
You know, like, but I mean, if Uncharted or a game like that Sony owned came out for Xbox, well, that would be pretty bad.
And even though it was heavily laden with issues right out of the gate, think about The Last of Us coming out on PC.
Yeah,
like that took how many years for it to come out on PC? But yet again, they have apparently. Oops, see, I'm trying to silence notifications. It didn't happen fast enough. But no, it's like they have other IP that they're willing to take to other platforms when they see the benefit of it.
Yeah.
But I still don't see. I don't think it's going to be a good thing overall for the gaming industry, because as other studios get eaten up, at the end of the day, that's why I think it's still funny that Nintendo is as successful as they are, because they don't really go out and acquire studios. They still have a lot of their brain trust inside their own house and developing these really creative, interesting games under all of the same IP that they've had for the last 30 years.
And that's a good example too, though, but all the best Nintendo games are Nintendo games.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's Call of Duty on Nintendo Switch. Who cares?
I bought a Switch for Tears of the Kingdom.
Just for one game.
How many third-party games are on there that I'm like, I'm going to buy that, I'm going to put it on my PlayStation?
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes the hardware is better. It's going to run smoother and better on there. I'm not going to buy it on the Switch.
Microsoft gave Nintendo a 10-year Call of Duty contract, too. I'm not going to buy Call of Duty on the Switch.
No. And vice versa. It's like there's other games like WoW or I mean, yes, there may be games that I like, Starfield or Elder Scrolls, that may be system sellers if they were a timed exclusive for Xbox, but it's not going to necessarily keep me from buying a PlayStation. If anything, I don't want to say it screws the consumer over. It just gives you it's what Microsoft wants. It gives me a reason to go and pick up their console or to play on their platform. Yeah. And for me, it's like, okay, I went from maybe being only a Sony fanboy to saying, all right, I guess if I want to play this series because it's great over here and they keep hitting it out of the park with every game they release, I'll stay on Sony. But for this console exclusive, I've got to go over to Microsoft.
And I think what it really does, and this is what Microsoft wants, not so much convinces people to go buy an Xbox, but it convinces more people to sign up for Game Pass, where you don't necessarily have to have an Xbox, but if you can play on PC or anything that'll stream Game Pass, it's like, well, I don't want to shell out $500 for an Xbox, but I really want to play the new Elder Scrolls. I'll sign up for Game Pass for a couple months and play it on PC.
There you go. And then if I ever want to subscribe or resubscribe when I'm done playing it later down the road, I can and pick up where I left off. Exactly. You can kind of come back. And again, that all goes back to what I think Microsoft is doing with the Xbox brand. And because they have lost the last two console generations, they are now pivoting to offering their Xbox as a service as opposed to a console. And I think that's where Sony's getting their panties in a wad, is they still have to put up the upfront cost of producing a console. Because we all know that every console generation, that most of the time what ends up happening is they take a loss on the console to sell the software where they're going to make the profit. And then as the console becomes cheaper over the years to produce, they then start making a profit. But that's 4 or 5 years down the road. And so Sony's now going to still have to eat that in terms of R&D and getting what the next console is going to be and fixing up a nice looking box to sell you for whatever the next console generation is going to lead into. Whereas Microsoft may lead it to a point of saying, well, we're not going to compete in that space. We're only going to compete in such a way that maybe we make boxes that you can upgrade in, at your own pace that will still play the same great library. If you have a gaming PC, you're going to get access to all of these games from being a Game Pass subscriber. And then when it comes to Nintendo, they've always been the outlier. They've never created power-hungry hardware that has said, this is the next gen alternative. It's always been, no, we're going to create an intuitive way to interact and play with it, but ultimately our software and the experience you get here is one of a kind you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
And whereas Sony now is going to be the only outlier that has to compete in the console war space, and I think that's what ultimately scares
You think if Xbox or Microsoft, you think if they kind of stepped back from the hardware side, the console side, and said, well, what about we want to strike a deal to get Game Pass on the PlayStation? Do you think Sony would go for that, knowing that, well, people will buy our console and then
be able to play their games?
They'll play their Xbox games streaming on our console.
I don't see that, only because they have their own PlayStation Plus initiative, and I think it would directly compete against that.
Yeah.
And to them, they're going to pressure that value more so because that's directly tied. Because if you go and get a Game Pass subscriber, even if it's $10, that's still $10 they're not spending on PlayStation Network every month.
Yeah.
And I think PlayStation's going to be like, well, how do we incentivize people to buy our streaming?
Well, yeah, they'd still have to have PlayStation Network to play online because you can't connect to online without the PSN.
But I mean, how basically what you're going to get is the same issue we have, I think, with subscription services to streaming services. It's like eventually you're going to max out what people are willing to pay for services.
Yeah, true.
And I think in Sony's end, it's like they would either have to cut costs for what each tier is at an entry point of subscription right now, or they would just say, no, we're not going to offer that. If you want that, go to Xbox.
Yeah.
Like to them, their incentive, I think, is still going to be our consoles sell because we offer just the same as Nintendo. We offer a one-of-a-kind of experience where we're going to have the most powerful hardware you can get in a home console, and our first-party studios are going to create one-of-a-kind experiences that you can only get on PlayStation. And that's been their bread and butter since, honestly, PS1. And they've only strengthened that core of whether it's Santa Monica Studio, Naughty Dog, Bend Studio. I mean, they have a litany of first-party studios that have just created a library of one-of-a-kinds that you can only get on PlayStation.
Yeah.
And I think they'll continue to go down that road. It's going to be weird to see the landscape change maybe in the next console generation to see how does Microsoft answer. Do they offer just a box that's modular, like a PC that you build and can spend from anywhere from like $200-$300 to $1,000, and basically say, oh, well, this is all I'm going to need for the next 5 years, and then maybe some parts will get outdated and you can upgrade. I don't know why that keeps going off. I have it silenced.
Okay.
But anyways, it's like basically, yeah, I don't know if they're going to go that route or if they're going to still create a box, because the thing is they're losing money on the Series X.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not selling enough to push it into the successful category of, I think that's why they've been pushing Game Pass and they've been making it. But even they're sort of losing money to get people on board and get them hooked so that they feel like this is a service they can't live without, because they've already increased Game Pass from I think it was $10 to $12 a month or something.
It went from, so it was originally $15 and now it's like $16.99 for Ultimate.
Okay.
The Game Pass Core, which is their new instead of Gold, is now like $10 a month.
What does that offer? I didn't see what I know. It replaces Xbox Live Gold, but is it just the Gold, like games with Gold plus your online subscription?
So I guess they're no longer giving out monthly games like they did with Game with Gold. It's basically you get like 25 free games that they said they would add games to it every 2 to 3 times a year. And basically, you pay this $10. You get to play online. You get your online gaming because you do have to pay for something just like Sony to play online. So for $10, you get online play and these select games that they'll add to 2 to 3 times a year, as opposed to Ultimate, where you have like hundreds of library and every single new game
And
is
the first release, or
Yeah.
what do they call it?
Day one release.
Yeah,
Day one
release.
release,
Yeah, that's not a part of Game Pass Core. You have
Yeah.
to have Ultimate for all the day one releases.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Which I mean, that's a crazy good incentive, but I also think that's
But you're
terrible for margins.
Paying $17 a month
to
for-
get a day one release that's going to inhibit day one sales of that game.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it, but it's like
That's why Sony
I
doesn't
just-
do it. I mean, yeah, it makes Game Pass seem more enticing, but like, Sony doesn't offer their first party.
But it's
games.
just like Movie Pass. Sony
Yeah.
Sony knows they can't keep it up forever.
Yes.
There's no way.
It's
that's
not feasible. That's why
right.
they don't. Yeah.
They again, we know they have the deeper pockets. They know they're shelling out this money. They're looking at the long game, and I get it. And that's why I said overall in the industry, I don't think it's good when you have bigger media conglomerates, gobbling up other major media conglomerates, because I just think the more corporate it gets, the less creativity there is, because now the whole incentive structure is let's just create an addictive game. I mean, think about Activision and Blizzard and what they do. I mean, they create games that are solely for the purpose of getting you hooked and literally just creating small incremental changes every year to the same formula and just keep having the same, people come back. And until people just completely stop tuning into it, it's successful. So I can't blame them for doing it. I just, overall on the industry side, I don't think it adds creativity and ingenuity to video games. I think it just makes it more of a mindless consumption, the same as a lot of movies are and TV shows are. So, I mean, you're just going to get more bloat in that regard. But overall, I know we ran over time, way over. Sorry, guys. So that's our thoughts on the acquisition of Activision Blizzard by Microsoft. Pretty much all absolutely going through. I don't think there's any more legal hurdles they've got to go through. I mean, at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is you got to innovate and you got to create something new that the masses want. And that always is left up to the creatives at the end of the day anyway.
The entertainment industry, movies and video games.
Yep.
I mean, everything's shifting.
Yep.
Shifting.
Paradigm. Smaller and shrinking. And as it shrinks, there's more others on the outliers that say, well, we got a new way to approach this. We're one of those. So like, share, subscribe. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Right there at the bottom of your screen, all of our social media links, Red Moon Book, Red Moon Tweet, Red Moon Picks, and of course, search for Red Moon Productions on YouTube and on Rumble. We appreciate all the love. We appreciate everything that you all do for us out there and getting the word out and tuning in every single week. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We also have that old-fashioned way of reaching out to us. Keith, you do it best.
RMPodcast at redmoonproductions.com.
Just beautiful. Love it. Absolutely love it. Alrighty, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of the Red Moon Podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Until next time, I'm one of your hosts, Brandon Davidson, alongside our normal new host,
Vanilla Steam.
There it is. It's back. And
Contigo.
you don't even remember the name you used at the beginning, do you?
Kevin Narwhal.
That's it. You did it.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. For more reviews, previous podcast shows, and everything Red Moon, visit our website, redmoonproductions.com. You can also like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter by searching for Red Moon Productions, LLC. We'll see you at the movies.